Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. One of the many paradoxes of Bitcoin is that it wants everyone to attack it. That's what makes it strong. That's what makes security go higher. That's what makes price go higher. And now we've got some new delinquents on the scene attacking Bitcoin. Stacy?
Well, Max, we have what are called concern trolls in the, I guess you could say they're slipping into the Bitcoin world from the monetary universe of fiat. And they are looking very troll-like. First of all, I use this photo of Hillary Clinton from MSNBC as she is expressing concern about Bitcoin. Here's a meme created by the Bitcoin community within a few moments. No, Bitcoin is threatening the dollar as reserve currency. Yes, says thinking man.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I see or hear a video of Hillary Clinton talking about Bitcoin, I always think about that video I've seen of a guy, he shaved the backside of his dog and taught it to walk backwards. And that's what she reminds me of.
Well, there's a lot of concern trolling going on, not just from Hillary Clinton, but also from the Bank of England and the IMF. And that's in this first headline here. Bank of England governor raises concerns about El Salvador's Bitcoin adoption. This is Andrew Bailey. He's the governor of the Bank of England. And Bailey was attending the Cambridge University Students' Union, responding to questions during the session. He called El Salvador's Bitcoin adoption concerning, as unsuspecting consumers could be hugely affected by its volatility. He said, quote, "It concerns me that a country would choose it as its national currency. What would worry me most of all is, do the citizens of El Salvador understand the nature and volatility of the currency they have?"
What the citizens of El Salvador understand is the nature and volatility of central bankers who inflate and print their fiat money into extinction and as a way to transfer wealth and property from the masses to central bankers. That's what the citizens of El Salvador understand. That's what citizens all over Central America understand. Remember, the United States has overthrown 15 countries in Central America, and they use the dollar as their primary weapon. It's a weapon of mass destruction, the US dollar and the English pound. This fellow Bailey over at the Bank of England is concerned that he's going to lose his job. Within 3 years, the Bank of England will be no more.
Well, of course. I mean, El Salvador, until it adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, already has the US dollar as its currency, its legal tender there. This introduces anti-fragility and individual sovereignty down to the level of the ordinary person, which is very important. All you have to do is go to Wikipedia, look up the El Salvador Civil War, and look up the role of the US there. It's actually quite shocking, even what Wikipedia is willing to publish. It's remarkable, and it protects, I think, the ordinary person, the bottom 98% of the Salvadoran population, from whatever the future holds from America, what they decide to do in the region. And I think that's important for the long-term viability of the ordinary person and the economy there. That's my opinion. Andrew Bailey, maybe his concern trolling is right. Go listen to him if that's what you want. But my opinion is a bit different than his.
Well, his concern about volatility is misplaced. With fiat money, you're mathematically guaranteed to lose purchasing power. As the British pound has done now since its creation, it's lost over 99% of its purchasing power. With Bitcoin, you're mathematically guaranteed to increase your purchasing power. So that's the choice. Will you accept a little volatility for a mathematically guaranteed increase in purchasing power? Or do you want to be with Andrew Bailey, no volatility, mathematically guaranteed loss of purchasing power? The El Salvadorians are saying, you know what? Max and Stacy are right.
But it's unconfiscatable and it's censorship resistant. Now, the likes of Andrew Bailey and Jay Powell preside over an all fiat regime whereby it's not just your leaders, but if they decide that they don't like your leaders for whatever reason, look at the people of Iran, Venezuela. They themselves, millions and millions of people are cut off from global commerce, from global trade, from global travel, from being just global human beings interacting with other human beings around the world, simply because they use that payments rail as a weapon to punish collectively the entire population. So for those outside of the privileged imperial centers like Washington, D.C. and London, the argument for Bitcoin, that is way more important, that feature of Bitcoin, than any sort of volatility as it hyper-Bitcoinizes to a higher level.
Right. And what Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, is doing is he's taking the power of government and he's decentralizing it. He's distributing it to the population. The 7 million people living in El Salvador will have an equal stake in the country. This will be the first time ever. Not since the American Constitution has this type of revolution been started. So now we're going to see the next phase of the American Revolution.
And he further stated that the International Monetary Fund, which monitors global financial risk, is not on board with El Salvador's decision either. The IMF repeatedly sounded caution in the recent past on choosing Bitcoin as legal tender. While its warnings were earlier veiled, it openly called out the country for its monetary policies earlier this week. It recommended the country narrow the scope of its Bitcoin law while strengthening the regulation and supervision of its newly established payment ecosystem. Payment ecosystem, our firsthand knowledge. I'm sure Andrew Bailey has not been there to El Zonte to see what it has encouraged, what the reality on the ground is it was instant payments, instant settlement of a bearer asset to the people of El Zonte, from everything from some pupusas that we bought using Lightning Payments Network, settled instantly, cost nothing. They were like a high-tech economy amidst a more rural seaside surfer town.
Right. And let's not forget the IMF is not a credible actor. Their role is to simply indebt countries to the most aggressive point possible to foist American products onto them, essentially. That's America's global empire and how it works. And the IMF is a tool of the American corporate empire. And so these new volcano bonds, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it at this very instant, but they will afford the ability for El Salvador to pay off the IMF loans and just say, get out of our country, you weasel.
But the ordinary person there on the ground selling pupusas in El Zonte, they are able to build generational wealth, not be the victim of generational debt. That's what the IMF voice on nations is, generational debt, so that they will always be subject to whatever the debt holders impose upon them.
It's generational wealth versus genocidal debt.
Exactly. And that's been the fact for a long time. And now there's a way out of it. Now, returning back to the concern trolling of, from the U.S., I want to make a note of, like, Hillary Clinton has a mullet now, too, kind of like Tony Blair has a mullet.
I thought it was Bobby Clark, who played on the Philadelphia Flyers back in the 1970s. If she opened her mouth right now, she probably would be missing all of her teeth.
It's a very Karen hairdo. I can't say mine's not, like, needing to be a little bit fixed. I hope mine looks a little bit better than hers. But there was also Elizabeth Warren in the press, and we just mentioned it at the end of the last episode. So I want to bring it up again here because, this is that fiat regime, right? Whereby everybody else gets the blame, except for them. Like, so Hillary Clinton was in the news saying it's Bitcoin which is jeopardizing the US dollar as reserve currency. It's Bitcoin's fault. It's not the fault of Jay Powell or the Treasury or the Congress or the mismanagement over the past few decades of the US economy. It is Bitcoin. Here we see, as a reminder, what Elizabeth Warren said, wondering why your Thanksgiving groceries cost more this year is because greedy corporations are charging Americans extra just to keep their stock prices high. This is outrageous. Her statement is indeed outrageous, right? I mean, suddenly, out of nowhere, these corporations all suddenly became greedy. It had nothing to do with the $6 trillion printed last year in treasury bonds that were given to the people, essentially, and base money supply. Like, that had nothing to do with it. And she refuses to mention that. that is the same problem what Hillary Clinton is identifying, is that the US dollar as reserve currency is under threat because of Bitcoin. The concern trolling goes hand in hand.
Right. Bitcoin is a light. And when that light is flicked on, like we see in El Salvador, there goes Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren, two cockroaches, running for their lives to escape the light. And they really need to get new jobs.
Remember, there used to be, back in the, I think, 80s or 90s, there used to be these trolls that you put on the end of your pencil. You know, people used to use pencils and pens. Go Google it, look it up if you don't, if you've never had to use a pencil or a pen. You know, most kids just use their finger type, right? Well, that's a good idea, is like some troll dolls from the IMF, from the ECB, from the Bank of England, Hillary, Elizabeth Warren, like a series of political trolls, monetary trolls.
Oh, yeah, we have a troll doll, actually, just a few feet away from here. I should go get it and show people what it is.
No. And speaking of this, I mean, we've seen the inflation showing up in commodity prices and agricultural prices, and house prices and stock prices and all of these prices. And here's always an important one, is mostly is for agriculture. And that is North American fertilizer shortage sparks fears of higher food prices. Warning to get your fertilizers now as farmers postpone nitrogen purchases, raising threat of rush on supplies before planting season. So the Texas Arctic blast in February and Hurricane Ida in August disrupted U.S. fertilizer production. Then prices of natural gas, a key input in producing nitrogen, soared in Europe due to high demand and low supplies. Global urea prices this month topped $1,000 a ton for the first time. And because Russia and China, they say, have curbed exports, as everybody hunkers down, ready for more lockdowns, more variants, more money printing, more inflation, and the end of the global fiat regime.
Right. Well, modern farming that uses hydrocarbons effectively, as what you see with these modern fertilizers, they are subject to the same problems that we're seeing inflation kick in across all commodities. And this is an era of deglobalization, de-fiatization, decentral bankization. And so you're going to see people hoard fertilizers to feed their own people. And of course, that's going to drive prices a lot higher. The response from policymakers, of course, will be to print more money, like Elizabeth Warren or Hillary Clinton. It'll be like, we need to print another 10 or $20 trillion this month. And of course, that'll drive Bitcoin to $1 million. Hey, we're going to take a break. When we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Simon Dixon of Bank to the Future, also author of the same book, Bank to the Future, published in 2010, the first book ever to mention Bitcoin. Simon going on to be the first and probably the best investment banker in Bitcoin. Simon, welcome back.
Always a pleasure to be here, Max.
All righty. Now, big news, as you know, as I know, I was frantically trying to reach you a few days ago, DM'd you the news, the $1 billion in volcano bonds from El Salvador. You live streamed an emergency broadcast when it was announced. This is big news. Tell us what your thoughts are at this time. You have had a few days to study it. What's your current thinking on this, Simon?
So when the president of El Salvador thanked Max Keiser for the inspiration behind the Bitcoin bond, and he unveiled his vision for Bitcoin City, I thought this is the accumulation of a decade of Bitcoin structuring, coming to its real, almost Bretton Woods style moment, but for Bitcoin for the internet. So most people will see this as a $1 billion bond structuring. But, Max, when we see this, we see somebody trying to do a significantly superior product that could potentially outperform any bond. There's obviously a big degree of risk in it, but taking out the risk by backing it with Bitcoin. So half the money raised will be used to purchase Bitcoin. And if the past does equal the future, not saying it will, then the potential to reinvent the bond market and other countries follow what El Salvador is doing now that they have made Bitcoin legal tender, really gives the opportunity to reinvent the financial system on a scale that could rapidly, go on in 2022 2022 into one chain of events, leading to that hyper-Bitcoinization, or central banks needing to put Bitcoin on their balance sheets. Now El Salvador has taken the lead as the first mover, just like many corporations did and just like individuals did. And it's just a really exciting time in financial history.
And the history in the region is one replete with the United States. Overthrowing governments, 15 governments to be exact, in Central America, overthrown by the U.S. The IMF immediately condemned the idea. The Bank of England condemned the idea. But Simon, this is a speculative attack that we're seeing in the corporate realm. MicroStrategy, headed up by, of course, one of the top CEOs in the country, Michael Saylor. And they are doing this. They're raising money in dollars, and they're using that money to buy Bitcoin. Here you have El Salvador, a country. They're raising money in dollars via this volcano bond, but they're going to put half of the billion into Bitcoin. This is a speculative attack on the U.S. dollar and the fiat monies and the central banks around the world. Simon, is that overstating it?
No, not really. It's not an overstatement, because this is countries using Bitcoin the way it was designed to use. Many people use Bitcoin as collateral so that they can borrow some dollars, because historically, with excessive money printing, dollar value goes down. And because Bitcoin's money supply is fixed, it's just basic supply and demand economics being played here at the country level. So individuals have been doing that for a long time. As you said, corporations started doing that throughout 2020 and 2021, whether it be a Tesla or a MicroStrategy. And now El Salvador is saying, let's make Bitcoin legal tender, and let's play the fact that you can issue above inflation returns. You can get the amount of interest you have to pay down by having a Bitcoin kicker backing the bond. And so there's a bit of financial engineering here, which really is doing the way that Bitcoin was designed, borrowing an inflationary currency that goes down in value over time, backed by a deflationary currency that has a fixed supply that goes up over time. And if the economics go in the way that the Bitcoin has been designed, then this is really a signal for countries to follow, in order to really move away their dependency, using the dollar for what it is and using Bitcoin for what it is, in something that could really, really have a cascading effect. And I think that that is reflected in the comments that are coming up. And it really required a brave president, an entrepreneurial president. And El Salvador seems to have the cojones to execute this.
Yeah, when I heard about this, and every time I think about it, I'm literally shaking with excitement. Samson Mao over there at Blockstream says this is the biggest thing since Bitcoin itself, going back to the Genesis block of 2009. It should be noted that Samson Mao over at Blockstream, while we were talking about these Bitcoin-backed bonds as being a real way to fight back against the IMF, when El Salvador first announced that they were making Bitcoin legal tender, I was very vocal in saying, hey, do bonds, do Bitcoin-backed bonds, do volcano bonds. Samson and Blockstream were actually in conversation with El Salvador government and architecting this very thing. What we heard on a call recently, Simon, is they went essentially with the Samson Mao plan, which is a bond that'll be half invested in Bitcoin, half in infrastructure. It pays a 6.5% coupon, which is, as you point out, above the inflation rate. And that infrastructure spend is going to go in part to a new city in El Salvador called Bitcoin City to the east. This is another remarkable development, Simon, because, we've witnessed over the past 10, 11 years, a lot of countries and a lot of territories flirting with the idea of becoming Bitcoin and hyper-Bitcoinization. For example, Isle of Man and others. But this looks like they're finally going to do it, Simon. They're going to create hyper-Bitcoinization, a circular economy, all based on Bitcoin right there in El Salvador. Is this is this the one we've been waiting for?
It really is. And so, Max, we've both been on those government-led conferences. We did one back in 2014. We did the first Bitcoin conference in Prague in Europe. And then we did the country level ones where the Isle of Man said that they want to make a big, bold move. And then the government want to get all excited and regulators then decide that it's not right for that country. And then since then, we've seen country that say, we want the jobs, we want the innovation, but no one made the move that El Salvador has made. So why did they make that move? Well, desperation is really the mother of all innovation. And so El Salvador in a situation where, they have $17 billion of debt. They have, really this is their last straw is to pick, well, what could we do? Well, let's make a bet on Bitcoin. Let's construct that. Let's get the Bitcoin community around. Let's get the financial engineers. Max gives them, inspires the idea behind the Bitcoin bond. Blockstream says you can launch it on top of Bitcoin. The technology now exists today. You have Bank to the Future and Bitfinex that are able to provide primary and secondary trading. And really just all the pieces and parts have come together to make this happen. And as we said, it was way back in 2014 when, we first started investing in Bitcoin bonds. We could only find literally at Bank to the Future about 15 to 20 investors. It turned out to be one of their best investments that they made, but we could only find 15 to 20 investors that would take that risk right now. Now we're at the stage where countries are doing it. And you can get the first phase of that $1 billion. And if this ends up taking El Salvador out of their sovereign debt situation and sparking off a wave of innovation, then this truly is the moment where David can beat Goliath and other countries can get on board until you have the final central bank that has the most vested interest, the Federal Reserve, capitulating at the very last stage, but all of the smaller ones get to do it first. And it can have a real game theoretical cascading effect if this can be done correctly.
Yeah, great to see Bitfinex involved, talking about 2014 and the fact that we were active going to these conferences at that time. We were both at the 2011, the first conference in Prague. Bitfinex, of course, and other newbies to Bitcoin like Kraken and other companies are all part of Bitcoin Capital, which is something you and I launched back in that 2013, 2014 period. Great to see these names that are native to the space emerge now as the global players. My understanding is that Bitfinex is now seeking a license to do business in El Salvador. They'll be the first licensed exchange in the country to do so. My question is that where Bitcoin disrupted money by essentially perfecting money after 100,000 years of trying to perfect money, it seems like these volcano bonds and what President Nayib Bukele is doing in El Salvador is he's disrupting the 300-year-old securities industry. This is a new start for the securities industry, Simon.
Yeah, here's the uniqueness of El Salvador's situation. They don't really have securities laws. They don't have a developed market. And what we have often seen, like we did with mobile money in Africa, is you see people that don't have banking infrastructure leapfrogging to the next stage of innovation. Now we're seeing that the countries that can use Bitcoin are now leapfrogging securities markets and reinventing them in line with the technology that exists today. So now that we have the innovation of securities being able to be launched on top of Bitcoin, securities laws can not be based upon, what is the impact? So if you do it in the United States, for example, you have 1933 laws that were developed after a speculative bubble after the Great Depression that had a few changes and a few iterations over time, and the largest financial market and the most liquid financial market. Any change that they make in their securities laws has vast consequences on all the previous IPOs, on the previous public companies. But what if you could start from scratch? What if you have nothing to lose? Well, then you can reinvent and decide what should securities look like today, given that everything's digital. It can be done on top of infrastructure like Bitcoin. It can be done using money you can own, money you can spend, and one that has a fixed supply. And you can really build fit for purpose securities laws. And so that's exactly what El Salvador is saying. They're consulting the Bitcoin industry. At Bank to the Future, we'll make sure that we are, involved in applying for such a license, because it really is the reinvention of securities laws, which is another ginormous market on top of money. So you've got the reinvention of money, you've got the reinvention of the debt capital markets, you've got the reinvention of the equity capital markets, and custom built securities for the new age, for the young person that gets Bitcoin, and then ushering in the digital era built upon Bitcoin.
We'll be back in El Salvador in just a few weeks. We've got some high-level meetings scheduled. I will personally pitch the idea of Bank to the Future getting a license for El Salvador. If you guarantee that I've got a place within that organization in helping to move these bonds, which we're talking about a potential market of the global bond market of a minimum of $100 trillion, Simon. I mean, this is potentially the most explosive trade ever.
Yeah, Max, let's keep talking. The beauty is that over the years, you've been given some, amazing ideas. You're always pitching, thinking of financial innovation. You started even before Bitcoin with Hollywood Stock Exchange and the various other things. But now if we can just get that custom built securities laws, this gives a playground to really innovate and build financial products that can do things that legacy financial products can never do.
All right, let's carry this over to a second segment. But for now, thanks for being on Keiser Report.
Thank you.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report. With me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, Simon Dixon of Bank to the Future. Until next time, bye, y'all.